I said I put up a video. Here it is a day later, and you already have to make a change for Jordy Nelson, who unfortunately tore his ACL. So it's terrible news for anybody that already drafted. That's why I always try to advise, drafting like Labor Day weekend if you can swing it. Um, and I actually took him out of my rankings. I think I had him up here in this ballpark, 13 to. Actually, probably I had him a little higher, somewhere in this ballpark, like 11 to 15. And I actually, I bumped 3 or 4 guys up and put Randall Cobb right above Forte. That's really just like an upside pick. I'm always I'm a little weary of like running backs that have a lot of touches. That's why Lynch is a little bit further down. Same with Murray as well. So I put him right there at 16. He had 12 touchdowns last year. He still had 127 targets. So chances are that number is going to increase there. Same with the catches. Touchdowns, I think 12 will be pretty hard to beat, but I think the 10 range, 8 to 10 is pretty solid for him. And so that puts him up in, wide receiver 1 range, top 10, especially with Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball. So I think he was the only adjustment that I made. And yeah, so I'll get to the rankings now. So we have Le'Veon Bell as my number 1. Steelers offense, very high-powered offense here that I put on there. He does have the 2-game suspension, but he's also the most versatile running back in a great offense. So the only other person here for me that I even thought about was Adrian Peterson. He has a much better offense, better quarterback. Has some pieces on the side, like Rudolph will relieve some pressure from AP. Charles Johnson looks good in preseason. Mike Wallace is that deep threat, if not just to pull people out of the box, pull defenders out of the box. So I think that's my easy 1 and 2 there. Adrian Peterson's got a lot to prove. He's out for a year. So I think those 2 are solid. I don't think you can go wrong in either of them. And then my third here is Antonio Brown. You can see in the points there, 380. I think his worst game, what was it? It was 5 catches for 50 yards last year. You can't beat that type of production. He is the only one to beat Le'Veon Bell last year. And he's just a monster. He's a part of 181 targets. He was only number 2 behind Demaryius Thomas there. So he is solid, probably the safest choice because wide receivers stay a little healthier than running backs, less wear and tear. He returns punts too, so if your league, does that and he ends up scoring a touchdown, just more points for you. So now we're down to Lacy. Lacy looks good in preseason. He's a big old bulldozer. He's been catching a lot more passes. This is one thing that when I was making this ranking, I looked at Jamal Charles and Eddie Lacy. And Eddie Lacy played 1 more game than Charles, but he actually had just about the same amount of, touches, targets, receptions, touchdowns. So I think just what decided that for me is just the better offense, Aaron Rodgers is going to be able to throw the ball to, it doesn't matter what receiver. Last year it was Jared Boykin. Maybe that was 2 years ago. He just took off and he was, putting up like wide receiver 2, 3 numbers. So he's going to get a lot of red zone opportunities. So those touchdowns, that's probably right about the right range, 9 to 12, somewhere in there. If he starts catching more passes, then you bump that up a few. And Jamal Charles, he has that home run hitter, a little bit of durability issues on him, but he also is the focal point of that offense, without a doubt. Alex Smith is just a dump-off quarterback, a game manager. And, Charles is pretty safe there, I think. Then after that, this one was kind of tough from Julio to Dez. I think Julio is probably going to get more targets than he did last year. He's not coming off of an injury as well, so he's going to play more games, be healthier, essentially. And that touchdown number is pretty low. 6 is really low for somebody his talent. So that's what I'm banking on the difference. between him and Dez. I think Dez, that was a ridiculous year to have 16 touchdowns. It's a monstrous year. Gronk did it a few years ago, and not too many people put up those type of numbers. That's kind of like a career year. So I think that his production is going to decrease a little bit in the touchdown specifically. And then, so that's why I put Jones above Dez, even though I'd be happy with either of them. Same with Demaryius Thomas. I put them three kind of on that next tier of elite, after Antonio Brown. It's almost like a mini tier, right? Because they're all wide receiver ones. And you see the targets, 184, 11 touchdowns. I'd say that's pretty accurate. As far as like what you can expect this year, probably 10 to 12. Julius Thomas left a lot of touchdowns out, and Peyton is his quarterback. So, what else do you need? After that, Gronk. I know there's a lot of risk with Gronk because he does get injured. On top of that, Brady's out for 4 games, so you would have to think that his first 4 games are going to take a hit in production-wise. But he is just a freak. Right here it says he had about 40 more points than any other tight end in the league, and that right there is just that's a big difference because after Jimmy Graham and Gronk, there was a big gap between the next few tight ends. So that's why this is my argument of keeping him up so high, is that you get the best player at the position, and there's such a drastic difference week to week that if you're not playing somebody with, Kelsey, Olsen, something like that, chances are Gronk is going to outscore him, by quite an amount, at least like a touchdown range, anywhere from 6 to 10. So it's really helpful, even though I don't necessarily take tight ends in the first round. I've done some mock drafts, and I was kind of wary of the team that I ended up with, specifically at running backs. Like I felt like that was pretty low, or like pretty lacking. And I haven't had a real draft this year to where I took Gronk. I just had one so far. I ended up in the 12th pick, and I decided to go a different route than going Gronk because of what was already taken off the board. So the next one here is C.J. Anderson. My draft this year, I had the chance. I took Demaryius Thomas at 12, and I was thinking about taking C.J. Anderson, but I didn't like the fact they were on the same team. So I decided to go with A.J. Green instead. Could have easily gone with Hill as well, but I wanted to try out the 0 RB strat. I know that that strat goes out to like the 5th round or so, like to where like the 5th round is your first running back pick. But I don't think I was that ballsy, to do that. So when I got to the 3rd round and I saw the running backs that were left, I was like, all right, I got to get something. So back to CJ. He had at the end of the year, this 211 points is a lot of points for the amount of games that he actually played. To where he was like the clear-cut starter, where he was getting 15, 20 touches a game. So he is going to be a force to be reckoned with. I wouldn't be surprised if he finished like top 5 this year, assuming Peyton stays healthy and productive. So yeah, it's going to have a lot of touchdowns. Kubiak always leans on the run more. Kubiak's had Arian Foster, and Arian Foster's been, top few running back for a few years now, for at least 3, maybe 5, somewhere in there. So yeah, he's going to be great. Jeremy Hill's the same way. They showed last year that when they gave him more than 15 touches, he was very productive. He still has to kind of fight with Gio a little bit. Gio is one of those talents that's not going to go away. So that's why I put C.J. Anderson above him. I don't feel like C.J. Anderson has that. I mean, Hillman is pretty solid, but I think Gio is on a different level when it comes to like a 3rd down back. And the Bengals themselves, like their defense, are a little shaky, inconsistent. So I think that he's going to just continue doing what he was doing last year. He's going to give you good, solid, probably bottom end running back 1 numbers, and potentially some like top end throughout the year, depending on the matchup. The next one here is Marshawn Lynch. The last 4 years he's been just a monster. He has a lot of touches, which makes me a little weary for him. I think I'd prefer to be a year out of somebody of like an aging star essentially than to take him on that last year. I'm always a little weary on that, wasting a first round essentially. But high floor, the whole offense goes through Lynch, so I could see like if this was a standard league, he'd be up, much higher. He'd probably be up in the Jamal Charles, CJ. He'd probably be He'd arguably be top 5, 6 running back or pick. But I'm just a little weary about all the touches he's had. Megatron has a high floor. High floor just means that you're going to get 15, 20 points, assuming there's no injury. Then that's like potentially like without a touchdown in PPR. So he does have a very high floor. He's been playing less and less games. You see there that it's been 13 as of last year. So that definitely scares me. He still managed 8 touchdowns, which is a feat in itself. But when he was healthy, he was very productive. I think that he was like in the top 10 range when he was healthy. So yeah, he's solid. I like him in the second round more than I like him in the first round. Obviously, like with the 13th pick. But if you can get one of those stud running backs and then follow it up with Megatron, I think you're going to be solid on your team. Odell Beckham, had basically the best year. He has 295 points, which was just about 100 under Antonio Brown. But he also played 4 less games. He was averaging about 25, which is ridiculous in PPRs. And he was, basically on track to be, right neck and neck with Antonio Brown. So he's just, very, very high upside. Victor Cruz is coming back from an injury. I'm not really sold on anybody else in that offense except for Shane Vereen. I think Ruben Randall is solid, but he took a lot of targets and he dropped a bunch of balls. So I think OBJ is just the only real option that you go with in that offense in the first like 5 rounds or so. I really like Eli too because I think their defense is going to struggle, but I think OBJ is solid there. I only bumped him down a little bit because of that pace. I think that's my notes here is unsustainable, and which I really think it is. It's like Antonio Brown's last year was like a career year, and this rookie comes in and does it just about the same pace with less games. So I think that's an anomaly there. AJ Green, he was top 5 in 2013 before the foot injury, and he had BenJarvus Green-Ellis as his running back. So I know you could argue that would probably drop his numbers a bit, but then they also have to deal with the running back that is going to take 7, 8 in the box. So AJ Green is going to get a lot more chances for big plays, and I really like him. I drafted him in my first live draft I had this year in the beginning of the second, so I'm all in on AJ Green. Randall Cobb, he's only bumped up there because of Jordy. When Jordy was there, I think that this is about the range that Jordy was, give or take 1 or 2. And they're just playing with Aaron Rodgers, very efficient. He put up, he had 2 wide receiver 1s in his offense. This is the Packers. So, Randall Cobb's just going to continue going, probably end up with more targets. The touchdowns are really high there on 12. So I don't think that increases. That probably decreases a little bit. But the targets, the catches, just everything else is going to increase. Then comes into Forte. We talked a little bit about this earlier, that running backs are kind of on their last leg. I'd rather, miss out an opportunity of getting a potential like high-end RB2 versus taking a shot at, one of these wide receivers that are going to be like, assuming no injury happens, that they're going to be wide receiver 1s. They're going to put up a lot of points for you. And he also, he lost Trestman, so he's gonna his catches are gonna go at least in half there. Go down to the 50s range. His touchdowns may go up a little bit, so it might offset it. But yeah, I think that you are looking at quite a hit there, 350, which is you're talking like top 3 or 4 last year in PPR settings. So he was amazing last year, and I think that the whole offense, losing Brandon Marshall. Losing Trestman, who's very, throws a lot. So I think that's a negative on him. That's why I bumped him down. Justin Forsett, So we're looking at he gets basically the opposite there. So he gets Trestman. This one I could see you can interchange these three running backs like at any point here. I'm just a little higher on Forte because I think the offense is a little better than Forsett. And I think with DeMarco Murray, I think that just like last year, Polk ended up with a bunch of touchdowns. The guy that's on the Texans now, and I think that's going to happen a lot. Like with Matthews, I ended up drafting Matthews in like I think it was like 8th or 9th round in the one live draft I've already had. That's because I think that he's going to take a lot away from Murray. Murray's going to have good value, but I think it's going to be more like a high-end RB2, with upside of a 1. So this is just a little too rich. Round 1 is a little too rich for me on DeMarco Murray there. And he had a lot of touches, as you can see there, 400 touches. So I kind of skipped over Forsett, and he's just going to have more targets. He's in the Trestman offense. He showed last year he can stay healthy, and he was very effective. They have a good offensive line, and I think just having all those wide receiver problems, Forsett will probably get leaned on a little more. So I'm hoping that that's going to turn into more value for his points and for fantasy purposes. And then I put the quarterbacks here. These I kind of felt obligated to put them in the first 2 rounds because they always go. But I'm really not big on it. I've just seen all the mock drafts. I've tried good 15 or 20 mock drafts where I took Andrew Luck or Aaron Rodgers in the first or second, depending on the pick I was at, and I just really didn't like the team. I could see you making an argument if there was like a 6-point touchdown league, which I actually played in my live draft, and by the time it came around to me, I could have taken Aaron Rodgers, but I decided against it. So this one, I don't know, I feel kind of like I'm just leaning on the expert's opinion on this one as opposed to doing like my personal ranking, because I really don't think that there is hardly any way that I would pick him with my first 2 picks, and miss out on a wide receiver 1 or running back 1 or like a Gronk or something like that. I just don't see myself ever doing that. So I may adjust those as we go, but everybody knows Rodgers and Luck, they're going to finish top 2, and the points and everything are so similar, the touchdowns, everything. So they're both great options if you decide to go that route. Like if they fall to the 3rd, that's when my radar might be going off. But any live draft I've ever been in, 2 or 3 quarterbacks are gone before the 3rd round. So it doesn't seem like it's a likely scenario. Maybe in your league, but not in mine. So then we have Alshon Jeffries, so we're getting back to wide receivers, potentially like low-end wide receiver 1s with the upside of high-end 1s. So Alshon Jeffries is going to be, no more Marshall. Cutler likes to zone in and target like one of his targets there. The Eddie Royal factor kind of bumped him down a little bit because they have a good rapport. This is Cutler and Royal. And I think the offense is going to take a little bit of a down step without Marshall being there. So he'll have to be a true number 1. I know Marshall was hurt for a few games last year where he just didn't play, or he kind of was just a decoy. But this year it's going to be all on Jeffries, and I'm not big on Marquise Wilson, and Kevin White is hurt as well. So I think that kind of lost some value for him there. Talent-wise, he's up there with all the other rookies from, or not rookies, but rookies from last year. Like he's right in there. T.Y. Hilton, plays with Luck, real big play type of guy. Just signed a big contract. Luck's arguably his favorite target. So, that's just all pluses. They have more. The only downside you could say is probably that they took Gore and Andre Johnson. But I don't think that neither of those really affect T.Y. Hilton's value, because he's not a red zone target, which both of those are, Gore and Andre Johnson. So I think it's just more of the same for Hilton this year. I really like him. Like if you get the first pick in the draft, and then you target these 3 wide receivers. I have a live draft in about a week here, or I think 2 weeks. That is going to be what I plan to do. Get Le'Veon, assuming, no injuries, and then get the T.Y. Hilton, Everett, Evans, and Jeffrey, and then just, then profit later and hopefully win my league. And then the last one is Evans, real high upside. He has 12 touchdowns, which is really high. I don't know if he does that again. But Jameis Winston, as we can see in the preseason, he's not afraid to throw. Their defense is a little lacking, and he just has a real high upside. The only thing why I bumped him below these guys is Vincent Jackson is still there, very capable. Used to be wide receiver 1. That you could argue that there's going to be like more of a timeshare there, to where they're going to split a lot of targets, and then you got to factor in the tight end, Austin Seferian-Jenkins. So there's just a lot of moving parts there that I'm not really sold on. Doug Martin too. So that's why I bumped him down a little bit. But yeah, so there's my my first two round rankings for August. I guess it's the 23rd now. I'm sure by the time preseason hits around, hopefully none of these guys get hurt, but there's going to be plenty more injuries. So yeah, leave any comments below if you agree, disagree, anything. I love to shoot the shit, so I will post up some more videos soon. All right.